Imagine the American South in 1865. The Civil War has just ended, and 4 million newly freed Black Americans are tasting liberty for the first time. But this newfound freedom is fragile. A shadow of terror is stretching across the land. A shadow called the Ku Klux Klan. Night riders in white robes are burning homes, assassinating community leaders, and trying to drown the promise of emancipation in a river of fear. The federal government seems distant, and local law enforcement is often complicit or simply overwhelmed. For Black families, freedom isn't a guarantee. It's a daily struggle for survival. So, what do you do when the law won't protect you, when your right to exist is under constant, violent assault? Do you run? Do you hide? Or do you fight back? In the face of this terror, Black communities refused to surrender. They chose to organize. This wasn't about forming angry mobs or vigilante gangs. This was something far more powerful, far more legitimate. They formed the legal, state-authorized militia. These were official military companies, recognized by state governments, often commanded by Black officers who were veterans of the Union Army. Think about that for a moment. Just years after being enslaved, these men were now wearing uniforms, carrying rifles, and holding official commissions to protect and defend their communities. Leaders emerged from the community, men of incredible courage and vision. Men like Robert Smalls, the legendary hero who commandeered a Confederate ship to freedom during the war and later became a congressman. Men like Prince River, a formerly enslaved man from South Carolina who rose to the rank of trial justice and major general in the state militia. And then there was Captain Jim Williams, a blacksmith and a formidable military strategist. These weren't just soldiers. They were blacksmiths, farmers, preachers, and politicians. They were fathers and husbands who understood that the ballot box was meaningless if they couldn't protect their families from being dragged out of their homes at night. They took up arms not for aggression, but for defense, to secure the peace that had been so dearly won. These militias became a cornerstone of Black life during Reconstruction. You'd see them drilling in town squares, their movements precise, their discipline ironclad. They patrolled their neighborhoods, providing a visible deterrent to the Klan and other white supremacist groups. Their presence sent a clear message. This community is protected. In states like South Carolina, the transformation was astounding. By the early 1870s, the majority of the state's official militia was composed of Black men. They weren't seeking revenge for the horrors of slavery. They were enforcing the law. They were protecting polling places so Black men could vote freely. They were guarding their schools, their churches, and their homes. They were the thin, armed lines standing between order and chaos, between freedom and a return to servitude. And they were effective. Let me tell you about the Hamburg Massacre of 1876. A local Black militia unit was peacefully drilling when they were confronted by white gunmen. The militia defended themselves and their armory with incredible bravery against overwhelming odds. But the most stunning example of their power comes from York County, South Carolina, under the leadership of Captain Jim Williams. The Klan had been terrorizing the county for months, acting with impunity. The governor's proclamations were ignored. So, Williams decided to act. He gathered nearly 600 men from his militia network, a force that outnumbered the local Klan, chapter 10 to 1. One night, under the cover of darkness, They executed a perfect, silent raid. They surrounded the plantation where the local Klan leader and his key lieutenants were meeting. There was no chaotic shootout, no wild violence. Williams and his men moved with the discipline of a professional army. They arrested 11 of the most notorious Klan members in the region, disarmed them, and handed them over to federal authorities for prosecution, all without firing a single shot. This single act of disciplined, lawful force shattered the Klan's power in your county. It demonstrated that white supremacy was not an unstoppable force of nature. It was a criminal conspiracy that could be dismantled by organized, courageous, and lawful resistance. This is the history that was deliberately erased from our textbooks. We often told a simplified story that the original Ku Klux Klan just sort of faded away after President Grant passed the Enforcement Acts. But that's not the whole truth. The Klan didn't just vanish. In many places, they were defeated. They were crushed militarily by these organized black militias. They met a force that was more disciplined, better organized, and more committed to the rule of law than they were. The story of men like Captain Jim Williams provides a blueprint for what it takes to secure freedom. It's not just about winning a war or passing a law. It's about having the courage to stand up, organize, and defend that freedom with discipline and resolve when it comes under attack. This legacy of resistance is a vital part of American history, and it's a story that deserves to be remembered. It's 1871 in South Carolina. The Civil War is over, but for black communities, peace has not arrived. Imagine living under the constant threat of organized terror. Your property could be destroyed, your family intimidated, and your life ended at any moment by groups like the Ku Klux Klan. For generations, most history books have told us that these communities had no way to fight back, that they were simply victims waiting for saviors. But that story is incomplete. What if I told you that in the face of this terror, there was organized, disciplined, and legal resistance? What's rarely mentioned is this. Black veterans of the Union Army did not just fade away after emancipation. They were seasoned soldiers who knew how to fight, and they used that knowledge to protect their homes. Under leaders like Captain Jim Williams, hundreds of these veterans formed legally recognized community militias. They drilled, they trained, and they moved with military precision. This wasn't a mob, it was a coordinated defense force. In one incredible instance, these men surrounded the home of a known Klan leader, but instead of descending into chaos or violence, they acted with incredible restraint. They followed legal authority, detaining the suspects and delivering them directly to federal officials for trial. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice and organized self-defense. And for a brief, powerful moment, the federal government backed them up. President Grant's administration declared martial law in the most violent counties of South Carolina. U.S. troops were deployed, and they worked directly alongside these black militias to suppress the Klan and restore order. The results were astounding and undeniable. In areas where these militias operated openly, extremist violence plummeted in some cases by as much as 90%. The myth of the Klan's untouchable power began to crack. For the first time, these terrorists were on the run, their campaign of fear disrupted by the very people they sought to oppress. These brave men didn't stop at making arrests. They became the backbone of the legal case against the Klan. They testified in federal courts, providing first-hand accounts of the violence they had endured and witnessed. They meticulously gathered evidence, helping prosecutors build strong cases that led to convictions. This was a landmark moment. For the first time in American history, members of a white supremacist terrorist group were being held accountable under the law, thanks in large part to the courage of black citizens. This shattered the dangerous illusion that black Americans were passive victims of history. They weren't. They organized, they resisted, and they defended their communities, all within the bounds of the law. But this victory was short-lived. Powerful enemies were made. As political winds shifted, federal support for Reconstruction faded away, the troops were withdrawn, and the political will to prosecute the Klan vanished. The militias were systematically dismantled, leaving their communities vulnerable once again. Captain Jim Williams, the heroic leader, was later killed under mysterious circumstances, a tragic end for a true American patriot. And then the story was history books erased this chapter of resistance, replacing it with a narrative of silence and helplessness. But the truth remains. Black Americans did not wait to be saved. They stood their ground, fought for their freedom, and built a legacy of defiance that history chose to forget. In the years after the Civil War, the American South wasn't just rebuilding, land it was redefining power, and for the first time, a question emerged that terrified the nation. Could black Americans not only build their own communities, but also protect them and enforce justice in a system designed to deny them both? For a brief, powerful moment, the answer was a clear and resounding yes. Across the South, a new force for order emerged, state-recognized black militias. These were not vigilante groups. They were lawful institutions, operating under government authority and wearing official uniforms. They stepped in where local systems refused to act, bringing stability to regions long ruled by intimidation. Through legal arrests, community patrols, and direct cooperation with federal courts, these organized units successfully disrupted extremist networks. They weren't creating chaos, they were establishing structure and accountability, proving that a just society was possible when all its members were empowered to defend it. This was order where none had existed before, enforced by the very people who had been denied its protection for centuries. The game changed completely when the federal government, under President Ulysses S. Grant, decided to intervene directly. This wasn't just a suggestion. It was a mandate. Martial law was declared in key regions, and federal troops were deployed with a clear mission to work alongside local authorities, including those newly formed black militias, to protect civil rights. For a short, incredible period, black leadership wasn't just symbolic, it was real, tangible, and effective. With this newfound security, communities thrived. Schools for black children opened their doors. Elections, once sites of violence and suppression, were protected, allowing for fair representation. Safety was no longer a privilege. It was a right. It was, without a doubt, the most democratic moment the American South had ever seen. But this progress created a powerful backlash. The very success of Reconstruction became the reason for its downfall. In the North, industrial leaders grew anxious, worried that empowered workers in the South would inspire similar movements for rights and fair wages in their factories. In the South, the old elite feared the complete collapse of the racial hierarchy that had guaranteed their power and wealth for generations. And across the nation, politicians feared a new, organized voting bloc they could no longer control through fear or manipulation. One by one, these groups withdrew their support. The federal protection that had been the backbone of this progress was pulled back. New state governance, hostile to equality, swiftly reversed the reforms, stripping communities of their legal defenses and dismantling the systems that had brought them security. Power was deliberately returned to the very forces that Reconstruction had worked so hard to defeat. The story doesn't end there. Captain Jim Williams, a leader of one of these militias, was later killed. The militias themselves were systematically dismantled, and the entire era of Reconstruction was rewritten in history books, branded as a chaotic failure. But the evidence tells a different story. Reconstruction didn't fail because it was weak or misguided. It was ended because it worked. It proved that an equal, multiracial democracy was not only possible, but was beginning to thrive. The real lesson isn't just about the conflicts of the past. It's about the incredible power of organization, unity, and the perceived threat of true equality. Because when justice finally began to take root, those in power chose to bury the truth and silence the history. Thanks for watching. October 1871. York County, South Carolina. Under the cloak of darkness, a force of 600 black militia men is on the move. They march with purpose, their footsteps a quiet drumbeat against the silence of the night. Their mission is not one of aggression, but of protection. They are there to defend their people, to restore a justice that had been stolen, and to send a clear, unshakable message to the forces of terror that had plagued their communities. This wasn't just a march. It was a declaration. At the head of this disciplined column is Captain Jim Williams. His leadership is the glue holding this operation together. He understands that their power lies not in brute force, but in strategy, discipline, and the moral high ground. Under his command, the militia moves with precision. They aren't a mob. They are an organized force for justice. Doors are kicked down, not randomly, but with specific targets. Known Klan members are arrested, their reign of terror brought to an abrupt halt. The most remarkable part of this operation, it succeeds without a single drop of blood being shed on either side. For the black communities that had lived in fear, this was a beacon of hope. It was tangible proof that organized armed resistance was not only possible, but incredibly effective. Let's look at the numbers, because they tell a story that is simply stunning. In the areas where these black militias operated, Klan attacks plummeted by a staggering 90%. This wasn't an isolated incident in York County. Across the entire state of South Carolina, similar militias were coordinating their efforts. They conducted raids, arrested terrorists, and systematically restored order where the law had failed to protect them. These victories were not acts of rebellion in the way their opponents tried to frame them. They were legal, disciplined, and meticulously organized operations, often carried out by men who were veterans of the Civil War, using their military training to protect their constitutional rights and their families. They were enforcing the law, not breaking it. But this success This powerful blueprint for self-defense and community protection was something that the dominant white society could not tolerate. An armed and organized black population was a direct threat to the system of white supremacy they were trying to build. And so, the backlash was swift and systematic. A wave of Jim Crow laws began to sweep the South. New gun restrictions were specifically designed to disarm black citizens. Laws were passed to ban the very type of black community organization that had been so effective for decades. The possibility of legal armed resistance was methodically erased from the table. It is no coincidence that the Ku Klux Klan saw a massive resurgence in 1915. They could only return to power because black communities had been systematically and legally disarmed, left vulnerable once again. The history books may have tried to bury this chapter, but the truth remains undeniable. Freedom is never simply handed to you. It must be defended. Captain Jim Williams and the brave men of the black militias of South Carolina provided a powerful lesson. They demonstrated the incredible power that comes from combining the rule of law, the right to bear arms, and the strength of community organization. Their story is more than just a historical account. It's a blueprint for resistance, a testament to incredible courage, and a vital lesson that we cannot afford to forget. This is a part of our history that deserves to be known. Thanks for watching. If you found this story as powerful as I did, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more hidden histories. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light.